I'm assuming they were all virgins, but. Where was you today?
Snowmass.
Direction of this day of-
We're doing a lot of work for Kroger right now on their security stuff. Yeah. So I might run into a bit. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we did Newcastle yesterday, we got Rifle coming up, Hotchkiss. We're updating their communicators. So.
Upper end. Gucci stores.
Two.
Slum it down, you go to the city
Well,
market.
no, I was at a hotel today in Snowmass. It's $600 a night for a single bed, up to $3,000 a night. So no, I'm not slumming it anymore.
I'll tap in.
Okay. Get started here. What's your mic count? We're gonna get into that a little bit here. First of all, let's start with our treasurer's not here, but let's give you the.
Yeah, I've got the information.
Okay.
So we have $3,821.52 in our bank account and a whopping $38.11 in their PayPal account. And for the that's for the treasurer. For the secretary, I don't really have anything.
There's nothing on fire or blowing up. That's good.
No,
For media officer.
Media, so we do have the new YouTube channel. If you haven't checked that out, every time if you got videos or something you want to put up there, be related, get them up there. Jason sends me stuff, so there's little shorts and stuff. I did go ahead and decide to make that beekeeping 101, since it's now been 6 months. Instead of it just being private, it's now public. Maybe we can track some attention that way, and that way people can start, refreshing over the winter. Maybe we get some more interest in the club. Other than that, thanks to Ralph, one of our members, next month, I don't know if you guys saw that, but next month we are gonna have a guest speaker. His name is John, and he works for the Department of Health. And he's gonna come talk to us about the Cottage Food Act, because that seems to all of a sudden been a hot topic that's popping up everywhere. So.
Thank you to him, because I was gonna have to give the talk, so.
You'll hear that. We have someone from the health department that's going to talk to us on the Cottage Food Act, which lets us know what you can and can't do or supposed to be doing when you're selling or how you package and label honey. So it'll be good. And
I've got two things. First of all, this 16th, this coming Monday is the Delta Beekeepers Club, if you guys are up that way. A couple of you folks here from Grand Junction, Palisade go up that way. Everybody here is welcome. 6:30 at the Odd Fellows Hall on Route 92. If you need directions or want to know anything more about it, just come ask me. And the other thing is that if you'll remember I think it was May, we had a field trip planned to my apiary up in Eckerd to have everybody looking hives. And it got canceled because it was raining. So it is rescheduled for the 21st of this month. That's not this Saturday, it's next Saturday. And I will be sending out an email to the whole club so you can respond to that. Please RSVP. I need to know how many people are coming. And there'll be directions and everything in the email, but I just want to let you guys look at your calendar, and it's going to be kind of geared towards basics, towards looking at what pollen looks like, what brood balls look like, what a good laying pattern looks like, that kind of stuff. Just real basic, simple stuff for a hive inspection.
got ribs and hamburgers.
Yeah, there's water, and I decided but then it got canceled, was I am gonna bring my RV up, so we will have bathrooms. There's seats right up here. There's 3 seats up here if you guys wanna have a seat. Yeah, because the nearest bathrooms are quite a ways away. Probably 5, 6, 7 miles away, so I'm gonna bring my RV so that we do have a bathroom. And that's all I got.
So next month is our honey contest. So if you would like to enter that, come and get a jar. There's, again, the 2 categories is just your raw honey, and then we're going to do specialized honey. So that means creamed honey, infused honey, you know, funny honey, whether it's runny. So there's a couple of very specific rules that I want to remind you of. It has to be yours, your honey. So don't, if you're picking one up for somebody else, unless they're in the club, that's okay, but it's got to be your honey that your hives produced. And then bring them back at the next meeting. We'll check you in. Don't mark the jar. We will put a label on there, our number. So it'll be, it's a hidden contest. That way your name's not on it. Nobody knows who belongs to who. You'll have a list, or basically a judge sheet. Everybody gets to judge the honey. No, first place winner is $100 gift certificate to Man Lake. Second place, we said $50 to Man Lake. Third place is free membership. And so fourth place is nothing. There'll be door prizes. We got a number of door prizes that come, and we'll have some water refreshments as well. It's kind of a, but we also will have a guest speaker. So the guest speaker will start, and then we'll go right into the honey contest. Okay.
I think that's the reason why he didn't want to come this month. He wanted to come next month. When I told him we were doing honey, he's like,
Yeah.
"I'm gonna." That and it was a little short notice, but
Any questions on the contest? Yeah.
prize for the specialty, because that was the first, second, third, yeah. We'll have
I
something.
know, Tyler, what do you want? He kills it every year, isn't it?
Chocolate cream honey?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we did 50 for that. $50 gets it,
Did 50 for that. Okay.
because there's only a handful of the green honey. There's maybe 5 or 6, something. But anyway, we'll talk about that as a board. So that's important. So who has got all your honey extracted? You got all the honey off and you're all done. Yay. Okay. You're looking out there at that 6th or 7th super, honey super up there, and you're thinking, I don't know what I'm gonna do, or there's a I told to put them back on. So the longer that you wait, the harder it will be to extract. Here's the 2 reasons why. The first reason is when you're in a dearth, the bees don't like you taking their honey as much. If you're in the middle of a flow and it's warm outside, they won't even bother you. But if you're in a dearth, it's getting cold. A dearth means there's no natural forage, no nectar coming in. And we kind of hit a lull there right now. If you've noticed, it's been kind of we got one more hay cutting, and there's still some rabbit bush. The asters are still doing well. Some of the weeds like curly cup gumweed is coming on, and so there's some forage, but it's slowing down. And next week it'll really take a dive because the weather, they're going to get a cold front moving in, and that kind of shuts off a lot of nectar. So if you haven't pulled your supers, and think about it, take a minute and say, well, I need to do that. The second thing is not only the robbing, but at the cold. Your honey is much more difficult to extract when it's cold. When it drops below that 80 degrees, it's hard to extract out of the frame. So you can either artificially heat it up, and there's a number of ways to do that with heat lamps and making yourself a little box out of a 1-inch foam board. put a heat lamp or a little heater with a thermometer. You've got to have a way to regulate that heat. Because if you don't, you put it out in the garage, say, I'm gonna heat it up, and then in the morning, I'm gonna extract it. It'll be great, because it'll be nice and toasty. You come out there and it extracted itself. It's all over the floor. So,
Including the wax that flowed with it, and then it's re-solidified, and you've got a grill.
so again, there's a number of ways to build a little heat, a room or a box, and there's a number of ways to do that economically. But if you research that, there's probably 100 of them online, on YouTube. And there's that, but if you don't want to fight that, the best way to do that is soon as you pull that honey, go right into extraction. So don't let it wait overnight. So what we like to do is we pull honey by noon, and then that whole afternoon we're extracting. So we've been doing that for a couple weeks now. So pulling honey in the morning, and then get on the extractor. And usually by the end of that day, when it's winding down, even though my extraction room runs about 90 degrees, that honey's cooled down enough that the last few runs takes a lot out of it. So I'm giving you this by experience. It's important. So as soon as you pull that, the best case, if you're not able to do that, then you need to warm it up, or you pulled it, you started, something happened, you had a breakdown, an emergency, and couldn't finish it. Another way to warm it up, put it back on the beehive. So those even capped framed honey, you can put it back on the beehive, and a day later, they warmed it up. So that's pull the amount of honey that you can extract per box. Don't leave just a couple of frames. If you got 2 boxes, pull 1 box, then you extract that one, and a day later you can do the next one next weekend. So but be thinking about that, get the honey off, because next month we're going to be we won't be talking a lot about beekeeping. We're going to do the honey show, or the honey contest, and then but you need some information on preparing for winter. So that's what I'm going to kind of do today. We're going to talk to you a little bit and then do some odds and ends there, but talk about preparation for winter, getting ready for winter. Usually do that next month before November, and just touch on a couple of things. Anyway, most important thing about overwintering is the health of the honeybee. Your bees have to be healthy, or they're not going to make it. You'll notice, and I ask, what's your mite count? That's the first thing I do. What's your mite count? If you don't know what the mite load is, you don't know what the virus load is. And there are viruses right now in every single one of our beehives. They can deal with the viruses without the mite. It's the mite as the vector that injects those viruses directly into the fat body of the bee. So that's why we're always talking to you and encouraging you to make sure that your mite levels are low. And you don't know if your mite levels are low unless you're doing some way to check those. That we suggest checking them with this is a mite check. These are readily available on Manlake, Daydent, Better Bee. It's this cup, comes with a basket, fill it full of Ibersol alcohol, 91%, or Dawn dishwater, dish soap.
1 gallon of water, 1 to 2 tablespoons of Dawn dishwashing.
And it's a soapy solution also will release the mites. So either one. And 1/2 cup of bees. And we suggest, as an easy check, also don't shake, because basically that agitation, that your mites will get caught up in the clump of bees. It is a swirling motion. That's important, swirling motion. For at least 60 seconds, I suggest going in 90 or 120 seconds, 2 minutes, because I have found even after 1 minute, coming back, agitating it again, a couple more mites showed up. So anyway, and that's best, most accurate way of knowing what your mite load is.
if you'll watch the video online, it'll explain it really well. But there's also two different things. First of all, there's two lines here. It's for 200 and 300 bees. Half a cup is 300 of each of the top line. There were some questions last time on how much alcohol do I put in here? We have to cover the bees with alcohol. So it should be above that second line on your basket. Also, it just helps my arm in the swirling, is I swirl it this way, and then I swirl it this, from the top and the bottom. It just seems to me, if you're using soap water, after you swirl it, it's gonna have it sit there for a minute or two because it's all foam. And all the foam's gotta come down and it helps drop the mites.
After that, you look at the bottom and you count the mites. Mites are once you see a mite, it's very easy to recognize it. So some people say, well, that little piece of dirt, that little piece of pollen or that bee part, sometimes it makes it difficult, but once you see that red mite, you'll know exactly what it is. And some people say, well, I really can't see those mites. So that's one of the tools that I carry, that right there, Because and what's the threshold? What's the threshold of your mite load? 3. If you have more than 3, it's time to intervene. Okay, 3 this time of year, that's not bad. Because you remember that graph I talked to you about last month? Right now, the bee population is taking a dive. So that 60 to 80,000 colony of bees, all those majority of workers are now, they've expended their life gathering up honey and resources, and now they're going to die. They're headed out, they're at the end of their life, and they'll fly off. That's the last thing they do. The last thing they do, and they will not die in the hive. A healthy worker that is at the end of her life will not die in the hive. The last thing she'll do for the hive is leave and die on her own. Usually not out in front, but she'll wander off there on a nice little flower.
Heaven.
And the reason, think of it this way, you got 60,000 bees and you have a certain amount of mites. When that dies down to 20,000 bees with the same amount of mites, your mite count just tripled. That's why it's so important this time of year to get them under control.
And so if you're doing well along those lines and your mite count is low, you did good. You were on top of the game during the summer, and whatever treatment that you were using, or that you were just one of the blessed few that had those genetics that they deal with their mites on their own. And I have a number of colonies that do that, and man, they are honey producing fools because they're healthy. They've stayed healthy. There wasn't any issues, and so they're bombing it. Now, the biggest problem this time of year is the beekeeper that has low mite counts, and they just kind of go into cruise control. My bees are doing great, low mite count, I have no more problems, I'm good for winter. This is probably this month into first part of the next month is the height of absconding. This is where all of the non-treated colonies in a valley abscond because of their high mite load. And those bees leave their hives, and it's not like a swarm. When a beehive absconds, it's not like all the bees go and hang out in a branch in a tree like a swarm in the spring. Those bees spread out and they go to other colonies, and they beg their way into your colony that is all wonderfully pristine and healthy. Our previous president, Mark Kenny, has this frustration every year. Every year, he's surrounded by about 5 or 6 beekeepers who will not treat. Every year, their beehives abscond. Every year, their beehives die. Every year, they buy packages or nooks. Every year that he goes through this. His mite count And he's a master beekeeper, same university I went to, University of Montana, master beekeeping program. And so he knows what he's doing. His mite count is low this time of year, very low. He's got 1s and 2s and 0s. And every year, within a week, they jump up to 16 and 20 mites. It's that bad because all the surrounding beehives abscond and they go to where? The healthy colonies, which happens to be his. He's in the middle and they all just come to him. And so he's frustrated. He'll go to these other beekeepers and he's offered, he said, I will treat your bees for free. And I'll treat them with natural treatments like oxalic acid or formic acid. He said, you just pick one and I will do it for free. Just so that he can save the headache of his elevated mite count during this time of year. So I'm giving you that insight because even though you might have low mite counts and your bees look great, you don't know what your neighbors are doing. And that's not just neighbor, it's also your feral colonies that had swarmed earlier that are not mite resistant and they're going to be absconding as well. So let's just keep an eye on that. There's a couple of things that you can do to mitigate that this time of year. And a lot of times, though, that high mite count it's very frustrating because this is the most important time of the year to have healthy bees raising that winter nest. Right now, your winter nest is being raised. Right now, the queen is laying eggs for the winter nest. And so this is the most important time to have the healthiest beehive of the entire year. As they are raising the winter nest, that winter nest has got to live 5 to 6 months. And they've got to overwinter with strength and so to be mite free. So a couple of things that we do. Number one, after we find our mite load, and I'll do mite checks again at the end of this month or probably in second or third week here, maybe 2 weeks away, and I'll do spot checks. But if I'm looking at a hive and it just doesn't look right, how many know what I'm talking about? There's some hives that, man, they just look great. And then there's some hives you crack the lid and they're lethargic. They're just not moving right. And that's why I encourage you not to have just one beehive. And that's why we always say you need at least 2, is so you have something to gauge it by. You have a barometer, say, okay, this one doesn't look the same, as well as you can boost your weak hive from the strong hive. If there is an issue, you can borrow resources. And it always starts out with 1 or 2, and then it becomes 20 and 30. How many you got now, Tyler? 36. 36. Tyler is officially a sideliner. So this is what we call a sideliner. This is no longer a backyard beekeeper. He's a sideliner and sideliner. And Doug's right there too, is right in there getting, boosting the numbers. But these all end up in California. So it's a different level of preparation and different things. We prepare it differently. But for those of you, and I've overwintered here a number of times, and so I understand the overwinter, and I've overwintered at 7,600 feet, which is a little more stringent than here in town. When my beehives are under about 2 feet of snow on top of the lid. So there was about five feet of snow there and wondering, I don't know if there's any bees in there or not. Anyway, so one of the things that you want to do to make sure they're looking good, and we're talking about stores. I just had this question a couple of times, and so I'm going to answer that. Some of you wondering about how much do they need to overwinter? We say minimum of 80 pounds, and that usually does it in the Grand Valley. 80 pounds will normally get you through, and we'll discuss that November. I'll show you what 80 pounds. I'll bring in 80 pounds worth of beehive and let you feel while you lever that and how you're to gauge that yourself, so you can are they up to weight or not? And if they're not, then usually this is what it means. There's at least 12 to 14 frames of honey. That usually equals what they need in the double D. So 12 to 14 of those frames are honey. And that's right there. You can go a little bit more than that, but that'll give you an idea. That's capped honey. That's not open, that's capped frames of honey. So that, an idea of that's, but you don't have to worry about that just yet because we still have a good month of forage coming in. That the rabbit bush is taking off now. There's a few, like I said, all the asters, sunflowers. Sunflowers are really taking off right now, and sunflowers don't throw a lot of nectar, but they get a lot of good pollen, and that is perfect for the winter nest because the aster family is one of the most complete spectrums of nutrition when it comes to all the flowers. And that's by design, I believe, because they need that type of spectrum, that full spectrum of the protein to rear the winter nest, to feed the larvae. So as you're looking through, real quick, we're gonna do a fall inspection. What are some of the things we want to do on fall inspections? It's a little bit different than summer inspection. Fall inspection, we're looking as you walk up to the front entrance. Do you have a bunch of dead bees on the ground? Okay. This time of year, there might be a little bit more than usual. Don't get alarmed if there's maybe a couple dozen dead bees there. Be very alarmed if there's a pile that's like 2 inches thick by a baseball or a basketball size. Basketball size, yeah, there was an event. Anybody had something like that? You had a bunch of dead bees right out front. Anybody? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's indicative of a spray event. In other words, they got into pesticide or heavy herbicide, but usually it's pesticide. So if you had a pile of dead bees, a good pile of dead bees, and not just one of the colony, but sometimes it's just one, but normally it's a number of colonies, they got sprayed somehow, somewhere. And it's not the end of them. Sometimes it is, but it sets them way back. And also it depends on if they packed in that pollen that had insecticide in the frames. How can you tell if there is pesticide in the frame?
Dark.
Propolis. They propolize that cell over.
Oh.
They will cap that cell. So during the fall, it's very important when you're doing your fall inspections. If you might not even know you were in a spray event. You might not even know they got hit. Your bees didn't do anything. They just kind of were sluggish, rolling along, and they weren't really knocking it out of the park like they normally do. Well, I would start going through the frames and look for any propolized cappings. Because they know if it's poison. If it's poison, that is their defense mechanism, propolis, and they will cap that over. So if you have any frames of that, and then this time of year you can get away with removing those frames. Now, here's what some people say: well, what if it's got a frame of larvae, capped larvae? I don't want to. What I do then is I will set an excluder over that middle box. Take that cap frame that I'm going to get rid of, put it above the excluder so the queen can't come and lay back into that once those bees are hatched. As soon as that larva is hatched, then I can remove that frame and not sacrifice bees. This time of year, that's important. So you just put that above an excluder. And sometimes that you can even put it on a third box above, but again, you're running up against the clock. So if this is something that you're just now finding, it's important to recognize it. Now, if there's just a couple of cells that are propolized, that's not a big thing, but I'm talking about, man, there is like a band of about 2 inches or 3 inches around the bottom or around the top or in the middle or swage through the middle, then man, I don't care what the rest of that frame is. I remove that right away because that is a serious issue. And that will cost you. Yeah.
And that's different than, like, I've had bee bread and they put honey on it and cap that.
Oh yeah, that's no big deal. They'll do that when they're running out of room to put up honey. they'll put honey anywhere and everywhere they can. You know, on the lid, start coming down on the bottom. In the feeder. Okay. So yeah, that's a little bit different. They'll pack honey in like, and biggest problem is where they're backfilling the brood nest. So if you had a honey bound colony and you didn't fix it, your winter nest is going to be severely shrunk. So instead of overwintering with 20,000 bees, you're gonna have to overwinter with maybe 5,000, and it may not make it because that queen had no more place to lay because you got honey bound. Honey bound is that when you didn't put enough supers on top for the bees to put the honey, the flow that was coming in, they didn't, or that super was full and there was not another super, well, they're gonna put that honey somewhere. Then they'll start backfilling the brood nest. So as soon as that bee hatches, they don't even, the workers don't even allow the queen to lay. They'll just start replacing that cell with honey. And that's what we call being honey bound, yeah.
So about how many frames of brood do you want right now?
Right now, now it's hard for me to gauge that because I'm working with 8 frames of brood. And that's really good. Okay. But I run bees a little bit different than the backyard guy, but if you got 8 frames of brood, you're gonna make it through. The problem with that is that you gotta make sure you got stores to feed all those mouths. Okay, so that's another issue. I would say if you got 6 frames, that's right in that margin of really good. Okay, 6 frames, top and bottom right now. What's that?
Per super?
No, all together.
So if you had 8 frames, that would be 2 supers, 4 in each.
Two brood boxes, yeah. Not the supers, but the brood boxes. The big boxes,
Right.
yeah. So that's brood chamber. So 2 of those, and we run double deeps is what we call it, double deep. So 4 and 4. 4 and 4 or 6 and 2 or whatever the configuration is, but that's money right there. That's gonna be enough that you're gonna have a good cluster of bees. You're gonna have that volleyball size cluster that they'll make it through. They won't die of lack of numbers of keeping that colony warm. That size though, you gotta make sure you got enough stores. 6 frames a little bit smaller, and that is a good solid cluster of bees going through the winter, no problem. If you're down to 2 frames of brood, you got a baseball size. And by the time you come out, you got a ping pong and a middle queen, and she's gonna be freezing her tail off looking.
So if you've got one that has 2 or 4, and then another one that's got 8 or 10.
Equalize,
Yeah, okay,
yeah,
okay.
that is perfect. And so that is also something, and that's why I suggested get your honey off. Because this work really can't be done well until you are able to manipulate. I mean, you're taking those honey supers off and you're setting them to the side. They're still full of bees, and you don't know really what you're working with numbers wise. Again, at the end of this month, you'll kind of know that static number because all of those summer workers are gone. And so you are left with what your winter ratios are gonna be. There's gonna be more of those workers die off between now and November, okay? October it dies, the big dive is right now. That big crash is right at the end of this month, boom. And most of you are gonna say, man, my bees were just, and then all of a sudden, nothing, what happened? Well, that's normal this time of year, that's okay. As long as you have those frames of brood. Okay, the frames of brood, and they're going to, how long from egg to hatch on worker? 21 days, 21 days. And so you're gonna know that those eggs that are being laid now, you got 21 days, and that is winter nest. Starting in the end of October to November, that's winter nest. And that's the bees that don't fly. They will not leave the hive besides a few that are foraging either for water during really warm days, or a few that goes out, but the vast majority will not leave again until March, early March. When the bees really come foraging again, yeah.
We're gonna extract the honey. Put those empty. Bees back in there.
Yes. In fact, I would suggest you do that because that is part of their home if it's on top, if it's part of their, and they won't tear the snot out of it. A lot of people say, well, just leave it on its side out and they'll rob it out. They will, and they'll clean it up. But they also tear the snot out of it. And there'll be a pile of wax comb on the ground or at the bottom because they just eviscerate it when they're tearing out everything they can. Go ahead.
Not only that, but then you're feeding every yellow jacket in the neighborhood too. The best way to do that is to take your double D, put your inner cover over your double D with the center hole open. Put the super on top of that. And then your outer cover. Because the bees will go up there, they'll smell that, they'll go up there and they'll clean it all up. But they won't keep putting honey in it because they don't see it as part of their home. So leave it there for about 3 days, and then you can come and take that super off. It'll be squeaky clean.
It won't be tore up as bad as if you just left it out on its side, yeah.
If you got multiple supers on there, do you recommend right now taking, and after you've extracted, taking one super on top of the double deeps, and then put that inner cover on? So they can go ahead and replenish the super right now with a rabbit brush and other stuff?
Well, yeah, if you're,
Yeah.
it depends on how heavy your double deeps are. If your double deeps aren't packed out yet, then no, let them concentrate on the double deeps. Okay, if your double deeps, if you have empty frames, and a lot of people do, they still have empty frames, blank frames below, then force them to start working on those by doing what he said, put that inner cover supers. If they're packed out below, yeah, then let them start. Because if they don't have some place to put it, they'll put it in the brood nest, and you don't want that to happen. So yeah, you want to give them a place to put those stores besides the brood nest, because we're still working on that brood nest right now. Throughout this month, that's when the queen is laying that next generation for the winter nest. So that's a good question. Thanks, Ralph. So that's going to be, it's indicative to your personal situation. So that's not across the board. You got to know what's going on in your beehive. In other words, you got to be cracking lids and you got to get all the way down the bottom. And it's miserable this time of year. It's hard getting into the bottom like that. But so what I do, instead of tearing it all apart and looking, I will tip it up and look at the bottom. Okay?
That got me in trouble.
Well,
Sorry.
so it takes a little bit, but this is the best way to know what's going on underneath, because the bottom box, the bottom deep, is, you can tell the health of the hive by what's going on in the bottom box. The strength of the hive also can be understood and realized by the bottom box. You're not going to know by looking down through the top box, because you can't see anything that's going on. Because some people say, man, I thought it was really good. I thought I had just total, strength of bees. And basically they were faking you out because they were just hanging out the top half on the top part of the frames. So you had bees maybe 2-3 inches down across the top, and the rest of it's empty. So that's, a lot of times they'll do that. If there's something wrong in that bottom, if there's something wrong in the bottom deep, like bad comb, they'll abandon and just move up. They'll abandon and they'll start laying in supers if you don't have an excluder, because there's something wrong so if you haven't been down there in a while and you really don't want to dig in elbows deep in 80,000 bees, tip it up and look. Yeah.
So, just another follow-on question. Last month after the meeting, this is just for me personally, I went through it, got everything balanced out. So my deeps, they're perfect. So got the brood, everything's great. So I've got 3 supers on one of them, for example.
Okay.
I take it back off and I'm gonna do what I said. I put the super back on and put the lid on. And between now and let's say the end of the month, or beginning of October, if that super is only half full and I leave it on there for them over the winter. And
I don't,
or take it off, because I'm saying it's just way too much extra for her
Yeah.
to warm up in
Well,
the winter, right?
yeah, so that's the problem. They've got to heat that space. So whatever space you're putting on top requires more heat, which requires more food. And so basically you're defeating your purpose, especially if it's, so, you know, that's why, well, they have all this honey, why don't just leave it there? Well, you gotta remember that they have to maintain that whole space. So that's why the configuration, this is not new with us. This has been going on since 1600s, you know, and back into the 1800s when they really defined this system. And so it's proven and tested that double deep overwintering in a double deep, unless you're going into a building like Ian Stepler in Canada, most Canadian beekeepers, all commercial guys overwinter in a building, you know, a climate controlled building. And so that's why the single, they'll overwinter in a single. They can do that, but if they didn't, then they'd have to have a lot more stores. They'd have to have a lot more food to overwinter in. In Alaska, they can't. They don't have an ability to overwinter. It's too cold and for too long. It's too cold, I mean, sub-zero. And so they don't have the ability. And so every year Alaska orders packages by the thousands. So I have a couple friends that are beekeepers in Alaska, and every year they order a couple thousand packages and then disperse them in their clubs. So overwintering here though, in the Grand Valley, 4,500 feet elevation, and the little bit of snow that we get and the mild temperatures, the double deep, 80 to 100 pounds of weight is good.
Another thing about heat and what you're talking about, putting that other super on top of there, you gotta remember, honey is very, very dense. Thus, it's very, very hard to heat. And it holds heat very well. So that's why if your honey is down in those bottom 2 boxes during the day, they create a bunch of warmth and it warms up that honey. Then when the temperature drops down at night, it can give off that heat and keep those bottom boxes warm. If you have a bunch of honey up there, what happens is the heat rises and it keeps trying to heat that honey up in that super. And so it never warms up down in the bottom box well.
So just like your house, you know, you have insulation wear right on the lid. And because you don't have to heat that attic space. So it's right above in the ceiling. So that's the same principle, that if you have a much more, your house would be extremely cold if you had an open ceiling and, you know, those rafters, that attic space. So that's the same concept that we live with, keeping that warmth down. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. But anyway, back to we'll get into that a little bit more in our November meeting and get you ready to go. But these are some things you need to think about, where you're at. And I appreciate that, because if you did an extraction and we have a couple more weeks left of nectar flow, good nectar flow. And if we get a little bit of a bump of Indian summer, then there's always another little flow that comes in, and I just give all that back to the bees. But I got to make sure my winter nest is good. And so you kind of have to count your frames of brood. Make sure you got enough room for them. And if you do not, right now, you're going back, and some of you are thinking, well, I don't know. I don't know if they have enough frames of brood. What do I do? If you take one of those frames in the brood that they have filled in, extract it, and place it back in brood chamber. So now they have room to lay. They'll clean it up within a couple of days. She'll start laying, and then you're all right. You'll able to catch up. Be fine this time of year. Make sure you're not honey bound. Honey bound, you're not going to have enough bees go through the winter. Any questions on that? Yeah.
So I might have missed this, but so we don't keep the super on during the winter?
No.
Just the two deeps?
Yes,
The mountain.
yes.
So do you take that honey and put it into, if you have like an empty frame or not a full frame, would you take, if there's any honey up there, and put it out?
I do because I run deeps for my shallows, for my honey supers. I don't have shallows. All my configuration, a lot of people don't like to do that because this box full of honey, 100 to 120 pounds. That's why I hire college kids. Anyway, so I do that, but the problem is if your honey super is at 6 inches or the smaller one, and those are 9 inches, so taking that small frame and putting it below won't work. Won't work because there's a difference in size. So what you have, so just go ahead, so you pull that off again, just extract it, and there's more honey to be, so. So that's exactly why I do that, because I can rotate frames.
Right, that makes sense. I always forget that it's so much smaller, yeah.
Right, right. And I do the exact same thing in the mediums. I have 3 mediums for my brood box. So I can do that. If I have honey left in the super, I can drop it down into one of those mediums for when it's stored.
Oh, okay.
He does it in larges, I do it in mediums, because I have back problems.
And I just have brain problems. So do I, especially when they're up there 6 and
Well,
7.
ours are big, but they're still bigger than me. But, so then, so you would extract what's in there, but that won't be until like October? You let it go?
No, you wanna get those supers off
Because
before,
we just put them up there.
oh,
We were honeycomb. We had an interesting experience, and this wonderful lady right here, 5.5 hours aboard with us, helping
Right on.
us. We were totally honey bound and had no brood in the second deep.
Okay.
For reasons that you can probably imagine, because we didn't.
that's okay.
So, and we got 70 pounds of. We weren't expecting anything till next year. So yeah, so right now, everything looks good, like they're cleaning up now because of rent.
So you're gonna be good, and that's a great thing about this association, is that we have people that'll help each other.
5.5 hours here. She's like, I hope we finish before it starts. And I'm like, it's only like 4 o'clock. Oh, yeah, no, we were out there.
You know, if you do it right, I mean, and that's you're being careful, so you don't, mash a bunch of bees, so that's good.
She was awesome.
This club has got a lot of well-experienced and knowledgeable people, so. Anyway, so if you're honey bound and just heard what was said there, then you need to know how many frames that are being used for you, and if they're not, then give them someplace. So the end of the month, end of September, go ahead and pull.
Okay. Because we just put them up there.
Usually in the valley, the flow really tapers down. Tyler, don't you? The end of this, yeah, at the end of this month, it just kind of, and basically I want to give what's left to the bees.
Right.
And so,
Except for we have the tiny ones, I can't.
no, you can't swap them down. So you just pull those and if they're all blanks, this is what I mean by a blank. It's not drawn comb, it's all, okay, if it's blanks, it takes them a pound of honey. They could have made a pound of honey to draw one side. To draw a comb, it takes them an equivalent. So it takes a lot. And that's why we have our frames heavy wax, so that helps them. So it takes a lot to draw this out. So they may or may not. Sometimes they go up there and they say, too much work. Let's just go back down and do what we were doing.
A lot of it has to do with the temperature. When you're starting getting the cold nights, they don't want to draw wax at all.
No, they don't do well. In fact, and then you got heat problems. They got to heat up that. So, maybe in a week or two, see what they're doing. If they're up there doing it, then let them go. If they haven't done a thing, might as well just pull it.
Okay.
And like he was giving the advice to the gentleman back there, if the bottom deeps are not really well filled, then you can take it off so that they put that honey that they're bringing in down in the bottom boxes and fill those out. you gotta kind of play it by ear. If the bottom 2 boxes are really full, and they got lots of honey, then you know, you can leave it on there.
For
a
a
little
little
while.
bit longer.
Yeah, where you were at, so just
Yeah.
kind of see where you're at.
So if there's more brood at the bottom, I'm gonna wanna put some of that at the top, right?
No,
On the
I,
top.
I let them do their thing when it comes to where they want to put the brood this time of
Okay.
year. I won't equalize that as much. Normally, there's gonna be more in the bottom than the top. Normally, you're gonna have, at least 1 or 2 frames more than the top, just because that's the configuration of a normal beehive out there in the
Okay.
trees or wherever they're doing, and that's. Later on, I'll manipulate a few things, but that's not right now, so don't be real concerned if there's more than the other.
Okay.
Just all, what I'm saying, the total frames right now, if you have 6, you're doing good. Okay, 8, because you got a real strong colony, if you got one of those that every night you go out there, you got 8 boxes high, and the whole side is nothing but bees, because there's too many bees for them to go inside, you know, those kind of monsters. And yeah, you're gonna have 8 to 12 frames of brood this time of year. They have that many bees to cover it. They can only, the queen will outlay the workers. This is what I mean. The queen will lay up to 3,000, sometimes 4,000 eggs in one day. And so she lays that many eggs, but she's gotta have that many workers, nurse bees, to cover and start feeding all those eggs that she's laying. So some people say, well, I don't know what's wrong. They just have this really small bunch of bees and not doing anything. Well, you gotta have bees to make a lot of bees. And so that's why it takes a while for them to ramp up, because it takes the next generation, and it's 21 days. So it might take you 60 days before you have enough bees for them to cover all the eggs that she's laying. So if you don't have, and that's why some of those monsters, they have enough bees to cover that 5,000 eggs in a day, boom, and they're there. So, but anyway, that's where, how many frames you have, you just want to make sure that there is enough space available for her to lay. That's what I'm trying to get at. That was a long way to get there. Okay, a couple of tools, so enough space to lay. Is there anything going on? Is there comb that's looks terrible? How many have had to deal with? We have a lot of new beekeepers. How many have to deal with wonky, what we call wonky comb? Here's what I mean by wonky comb. It's that these 2 empty frames, you know, they're together, and because there is a lot of space in between these 2. They don't draw a comb this way. They're drawing out comb in between like this, and it's, you know, you crack them open, and you got lines like this, big old lines squished together. That's what we call that wonky. And there's, anybody have wonky comb?
The caves that go underneath.
Yep.
Yeah.
The bees forget to read the book. And so we have to, yeah, we have to re-educate them. So if, what I try to do, this is bee maintenance, you know, you're going in and scraping lids. I'm making sure that I'm not overpopularized someplace, taking care of wonky comb, kind of cleaning things up, because the summer they're going gangbusters and doing all those kinds of things that you do. The end of the year, they just got a mess, and you're trying to get things in order for them so you're successful moving into winter. But those are some of the things that we're housekeeping, if you would. So doing some housekeeping on this next inspection. Health of bees. You don't have to find the queen. All you have to do is find evidence of a queen. So don't worry about digging through every single frame. Gotta find the queen, gotta make sure I got a queen. What is evidence of a queen? If you got eggs. Got eggs, then you have had a queen within the last 3 days. Yeah, and you know, if you got like multiple eggs in a cell, well, there might be another issue. There is another issue going on. We'll get that in a minute.
What Jason was talking about as far as house cleaning is kind of a seasonal thing, okay? You're in them in the springtime and making sure everything's going right, getting them rolling for the summer. They get rolling in the summer and the honey flow's going, you kind of want to be hands off. You don't want to be in there digging through every frame every week and cleaning everything. So you kind of let them to their own devices. Well, that happens June, July, August, and now there's kind of a mess in there because you haven't been scraping every bit of propolis every time. And so that's what we're saying, from now until the middle of October is when you can get all that stuff cleaned up and get it ready for them for the winter. It's kind of just like the seasons go, the spring, the summer, the winter, you do different things during different seasons.
And here's some of my tools for that. Go ahead, Tyler.
Say, cautious how much propolis you're scraping off. Recent studies have talked about, if you actually leave propolis in there, it's messy and it's dealing with taffy all the time and just a goo, right? But it actually is helping keeping your eyes sterile and healthy.
It's part of the colony's immune system.
Yeah, they, so if you leave it actually in there, you're better off.
Right, I agree with you. I leave every bit of propolis I can inside a hive, with the exception of the functionality. Yeah, the functionality. On the frames, you need to make sure this is clean,
Where they.
where the
touch
two go together, okay? You need to make sure underneath of here is clean. Because when this sits in the box, if you don't, if you got a bunch under here, it'll lift this frame up some. Well, then it's too close to the frame on top, or it's too far from here down to the next one, and they start putting propolis and wax and everything in there. So what I'm talking about cleaning everything off is the functionality. Make sure the parts, the rails in here where the frames sit, this little edge, make sure that's clean. So I clean off every bit of propolis in those functional areas to make sure it works. Other than that, I don't clean propolis off.
Great tool that I always carry a couple of nice El Cheapos. So if there's bad wonky comb, easier to cut that out then. And I always carry a bucket for that stuff. I throw that in the bucket. Have you ever remembered too late that you forgot to put a frame in a box?
I've got some good pictures of that.
And they just did their thing. So I'm gonna tell on myself, Palisade, we were pulling nooks this spring. And this is on the back, way in an orchard, a couple of the settings that the farmer wanted us to put, so it's on the back side of the orchard, so we've got to walk to it, okay? We set them in there with forklift, but it's working, we got to walk to them, and we need one more nook, so went back there, we're gonna pull the nook. So pull the frames out, and ended up, and this is a really good one, ended up pulling two nooks out of there, one queens, and so there was 8 frames missing altogether, 2, 2, and 2, and 2, okay? So 2 on each side, and I just smashed everything together and leave the 2 open spaces all the way down.
Oh my.
I cracked the lid and there was comb from the lid, 2 boxes deep, 2 frames wide on both sides, all the way down. So you know what I did? Put the lid back on, walked away. And somebody else did it, okay? Hey Jared, I got a job for you today. You need 2 5-gallon buckets and a couple of knives. Anyway, so that's one of those things that we do. Another thing is uncapping tool. I always have an uncapping tool in my box. And this is part of my IPM, integrated pest management, is what I will do is this time of year, all the drones are getting kicked out, right? Pretty much. You can see it's fun to watch. You sit there and between now and October, middle of October, the drones, all the boys are getting kicked out the house. And so you can sit there at the front entrance and you can watch. They'll run them out and they won't let them back in. So the drones are leaving. There's no more use for drones right now. But the drone larvae usually at the bottom of the frame, they're usually down here. Take that uncapping tool. This is a good way to see what your mite load is because mites prefer drones. What is the gestation for a drone? What's the time frame on egg to hatch on a drone is 28 days. So you got an extra week. And so there is usually 1 to 2 more mites that come out of a drone larvae, a cell, out of a drone cell. So I'd like to take those and I'll get right underneath the head of that capping. And I'll pull them out, and this is why I have a white bucket, is I'll put that, turn it upside down. And right on top of the hive, I'll turn this upside down white, and this is not so white anymore. The other truck has one, and I'll pull that out and I'll set them down, and then I can see in those larvae that I just pulled out, the drone larvae, if I can see the mites. Because chances are that's what they're gonna be. And that's a good test. And right now, you don't need drones, so and I'll pull usually a whole row. Especially if I'm looking at a colony, this looks a little bit, they don't look as good as the others. I need to do a test, need to do a mite wash. Before I do a white wash, I'll just grab the uncapping fork, pull out some drone larvae, look at real close. Now, if they're close to hatching, they're already developed and their eyes are purple, and that's within a day or two of hatching. That's a good time to pull them, because then you can, the mites are also mature. A non-mature mite is translucent. Juvenile mite that has not, it's a couple of days from hatching, is translucent. So you can get some really good thick glasses and look, and you can see on that developing larvae, you can see the mites moving. It's really for me, it's kind of cool, because it's, hey, this. I'm weird that way, but that's all right.
It's really easy to see those mites because a lot of times the drone is still very pearly white.
Yeah.
And then you have that very reddish, red.
The mature mites,
Yeah,
yeah.
the mature mite on it, so.
So at least there'd be one mature mite, that's the female, the mom, that's like the translucent ones that have not yet matured, they haven't turned red yet sometimes, but if they're close, if those drone larvae you're pulling out has purple eyes, it's within 2 days of hatching, then you'll be able to see all the mites and see all 5 of them. And they're just like, and that's why I don't do it on top of the hive, because they'll climb right back down. I'll do it on the top of this and I'll start squishing. You don't want them back in, anyway.
I usually do it on the lid of the hives next to it.
So a couple other things, this is just some extra tools. You want extra tools, always carry a couple bars. This time of year, you have entrance reducers. For me, I always carry a couple of 3/4 inch, because all my entrances are 3/4 inch by 4 or 5. So I'll carry some of these if I need to lock a colony down. This time of year, you're gonna move into what we call robbing. Ever seen a colony being robbed? It's heartbreaking, because hive right next door is destroying. And this time of year, when you're moving into a dearth, once it starts, they won't stop. You can't get them to stop unless you lock them down. So I'll throw this on in the entrance, or another way to do it is with screen material. So they still have ventilation. If you have upper entrances, and this is how you can tell if a colony is being robbed, is they're going to try to get in any entrance that they can, any crack. So if you have a woodenware that's not real tight, there's a little bit of crack, they're going to be trying to get in to any area they can, around the side of the box, the front of the box, the back of the box, and it's a frenzy. So it's not normal traffic. That's the thing, there's not normal traffic, and usually there's dead bees because a war took place, and the guard bees of that hive are dead, and then now they're moving in and out, and they will not quit until every last resource is robbed out of that colony, and little or nothing left of the bees of that colony. And so if you have a real week, most of you have at least 1 or 2. You have those of you that have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 colonies, and you have one weak colony that's just barely struggling along, it has a threat of being robbed out. So just be aware of that. That's how you can shut it down. You have to lock it down so nothing can come and go. You know, that's how you stop it. Usually what I do is I lock it down, and overnight I'll stop it, and then overnight the next day I'll open it up.
Well, those of us that run, entrance reducers and you aren't on a pallet like he is, you can take the big entrance, flip it around to the small entrance. That gives it about that much. This is the best instrument you have right here for blocking that little spot. Just a regular wooden queen case, fits right in front of there, blocks them off, and then you can pull that up. Most people have one or two of these just hanging around in their box. And even on the small one, if it's on the small one, you can slide this over just enough where only one bee can pass through. They can't even pass going in and out. They have to take turns coming and going. And that'll usually lock it down enough where the robbers can't get in. That's a small enough entrance that they can defend it.
And it depends on when you caught it. You know, so, but if
Right.
you caught it early enough, you get her shut
Yeah.
down and it'll help.
If they're robbing the colony out and the bees in the colony aren't trying to defend, it's done. You're not gonna fix that.
If you have, after you get it shut down, if you do have a queen left, you can boost that colony's numbers with frames of brood from another one. And so that's the other thing. You want to you're thinking about equalizing. You want to begin to mark lids, or how do you keep a journal? How many of you keep some kind of journal or a tablet on your colonies? I would encourage you to do that. Start doing that per colony. There is different methods to do that. I use the lid, and I have always with me, I have a couple of construction crayons. And what I do is I mark my lids with very specific, and it's indicative to me. So this is all, and this, me and the guys I work with, we have a number of things that we mark our lids.
His personal code.
And so, such as FB, so and usually F, whatever I'm doing, and then I'll write the date on there. So whatever date I'm working at. So FB means a frame of brood. That means that needed some boosting somehow, or it was queenless and I'm trying to raise a queen this time of year, that won't work. But so during the year, I'll put FB, a frame of brood, then the date, and then my next inspection, I know what I'm looking for. On that frame, I will either mark it or do something on top of that frame of brood. So if I'm trying to draw a queen cell, I know right where it's at. I can go to that, and I'm reminding myself, okay, this is what I'm looking for. I don't forget. I'll QL. QL is a big one for us, queenless. So if you're queenless, you want to write that down and say, this was queenless and I need to do something about it. And so whatever you did, then you mark that next to that. But QL, when you're going through your apiary and you're not sure about, again, you don't have to find the queen, you just have to find evidence of the queen. There's no evidence of the queen. And if you're QL, what's going to happen next if you don't do anything? LW, which means
Laying worker.
laying worker. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. There are a number of ways online that you can fix a laying worker, but I would say this to you, that there is 99% of the time it don't work. A few people said, well, I fixed the laying worker, and it can be done. I've seen it done. I know guys that have done it. But the laying worker, when they go into that mode, it is, and you're trying to help them by combining it with a good hive, you just ruin two hives. So basically what you want to, and I know people will tell me all the time, I'm able to fix it, but laying worker is very difficult. And I'll give you my own personal experience, and I'm sure Trace has got some number of ways to.
So you just let it run its course then?
Okay, there's what I do. I pull every frame but two. I leave two frames in the middle of one box. I drop them down to a single, two frames, that'll hold them there. That'll hold those laying workers. The laying workers fly, yes, they can fly. No matter what, there's all kinds of, I personally know by experiences, I've tried for years to fix this issue. I'll leave them two frames that'll hold the bees, that'll hold those laying workers, and I'll let them die of attrition. That way they don't wreck the whole 10 frames or 9 frames, whatever I'm running in that box. and just die of attrition. Some people say, well, shake them out and they'll fly back. And the laying workers will stay there and all the good bees will fly back and they'll beg their way. Unless you shake them out 3 miles away, then. But again, that's what I do, and I don't have time. If I need that space, that hole, I'll just pick that whole box up and I'll move that whole box to a laying worker yard. I have a place that all I have is laying workers, and I just combine them all.
Let them die off.
And I know that's hard, but that's because when they get into that genetic mode, because it is the absence of queen mandibular pheromone. You see, every worker bee has the ability to lay eggs. They all have ovaries, they all can lay eggs, but they're unfertilized. And what suppresses their ability to lay eggs is the queen mandibular pheromone from the queen. When that queen mandibular pheromone dissipates or is gone, then that is what turns on their desire to start laying eggs. And you heard it before. How do you know you have a laying worker? There's multiple eggs in one cell, and it's not the full size egg. Usually they're smaller eggs, and they're not placed in the center like a good queen. They're usually on the side or to the side of the cell, and there's multiple eggs. And that is indicative of a laying worker. It's different than and that's another thing that I have on my list, is a DL. DL is a drone layer. That is a queen who wasn't well mated, or at the end of her life, that the spermaceca is empty and she's no longer able to lay fertile eggs. And now she is laying unfertilized eggs, which produces drones. So a DL, a drone layer, and I found the queen. She's a good looking queen. She's just, there's no cap, it's bumpy brood, and there's no flat brood. So there's an issue, that's a poor queen. So I put a DL and if it's a DL, and I think, well, I need to check this later on. I'm not gonna squish her just yet. She might just be coming into her own. She might have a new queen. I'm gonna give her a week or two, give her another inspection. So I'll put a check. So that's a DL and a check.
Let me say one thing real quick. With a laying worker, he's talking about more than one egg in the cell, okay? If you have a brand new queen, she just started laying in the last week, you may find a couple cells with more than one egg in it. A couple, not a bunch, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 at the most. And that should go away in a couple days, 2-3 days, that should be taken care of. So don't think, okay, I got eggs. If you have a brand new queen, kind of just disregard that and give her a week to get her stuff straight. She's just learning how to lay eggs. She has never done it before, so.
Yeah, it's that often, yeah. Yes,
Yes,
unfertilized eggs.
all unfertilized eggs become drone.
But if it's from your queen, because your queen will lay unfertilized eggs. A mated queen, a good queen, because that's how the drones are in all of your beehives. She'll lay an unfertilized egg so that colony can raise drones. So she has the ability, and that is those genetics of that drone is good. The genetics of a laying worker is terrible. In fact, most of the time they're infertile. Those drones are infertile about 75% of the time. A laying worker drone is infertile. So it basically, like I said, it's a wash all the way around.
A queen can lay a fertilized or an unfertilized egg on demand when she wants to. She sticks her head in and measures how big the cell is. And if it's a bigger cell, she'll lay an unfertilized egg. If it's a regular worker cell, she'll lay a fertilized egg. So.
Then there's a Q and a check. I'll put a Q and a check. That means I'm the queen, but there's some issues there. I need to check her later on. There's whatever it was, and I need to make sure that my next inspection, and that I'm doing that because that next inspection, if she's still bad, then I got to pay attention. I got to start thinking about replacing that queen. Because the longer I wait, I'm getting closer to a laying worker and I'm also getting closer to a failing colony because the numbers are diving. So that's why I have these marks and that's why when I walk up to that colony, I'm checking it. I got all these things that I'm looking for immediately in that colony, and a little bit easier for you, but you need to come up with a system. This is a couple other things real quick. Queen cell. If I found a queen cell on a frame, and it depends on where it's at and what time of year. If it's in the spring and there's a bunch of queen cells on the bottom, well, they're getting ready to swarm, and swarm cells is not a big deal, okay? there's a couple of things, we'll talk about that in the spring. But if I got a queen cell in the middle, drawn out, that's what we call a supersedure cell. That means that queen is failing and they are trying to raise another queen and I need to be paying attention. Okay, so I found a queen cell. There's some going on and I need to check next inspection of what happened. A lot of people just squish that queen cell. No. They know what they're doing. They know exactly what they need to do. And a lot more than I do. They know if their queen is failing, if there's a problem with her, she got injured in the last inspection or something happened, and that's their last ditch effort to do something. So I will, yeah, go ahead.
Actually wants to add to that, but for the Saskatraz bees, are they actually prone to making even queen cups? Because
there's always queen cups in your in colonies, always a queen cup, and that's good. A queen cup is not necessarily a queen cell. Okay, because there's a queen cup, and what I do when I see those is it charged.
but like in the past, my bees I've always seen like 1 or 2 queen cups in a hive. The Saskatraz, I'm seeing like 6 or 8.
No, I don't ever see that many.
Yeah,
I'll see 1 or 2 and occasionally.
Yeah.
I don't see, so,
but
but they're not charged. And what I mean by charged, there's nothing in them. They're empty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know Russians would do that too. They would keep like 3 queen cells, but not charged, but yeah. Yeah, one hive that does it has 6 or 8 queen cells, or that's queen cells, 5 queen cells.
You know what Adam's asking, what he's talking about, a queen cup, is that it is where they are starting to draw out a queen cell. Okay, so it's just the start. So it might be 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch, and it's different locations, usually on the bottom, near the top edges, and that's okay, as long as there's nothing in it. If they have charged it, that means they are trying to raise a queen. So that's one of my marks of the queen check, queen cell. T is a big one this time of year. A T means treatment. Either it needs treating, but I always take something with me. I always have on hand. This is Super DFM. The bag's almost empty. Grabbed it. I should grab the Super DFM, the biologics. That is some of the best gut health that we've come up with so far. Wish we had this years ago. There's very few things that'll combat viruses. This is one of the things that won't eliminate it, but it gives them the ability to fight it. Okay, so it increases their immune system. A Super DFM. Another thing we use is Mellifera Boost. So if your bees are lethargic, or one's not really doing well, you make sure your mite levels are low, then you need to boost their immunity. So that Super DFM, and it's relatively inexpensive, you can get smaller packages, Amazon. I encourage you to look into that just right now to make sure they're peak performance, peak health going into the end of the fall, into early winter. Basically, they're raising that brood nest. You need healthy bees to do that. So when I have a T on there, I also write a date. Okay, a treatment, and sometimes I'll write down what I was treating for. I have a couple other acronyms or abbreviations for what I was treating for and how I treated and a date. Most of these, they suggest 2 treatments, at least a week apart, 2 weeks apart, and that's good. And you see a immediate improvement in how their health is, how they're moving, how they're reacting, so on and so forth. So the T is a big one. So
This right here, you can buy I just looked this up. You can buy a smaller bag that's 10 treatments for $22.98. So it's about $2.30 a treatment. It's very, very cheap.
yeah, well worth that.
And what it does is, it's just like you, if you're good and healthy and strong, you're less likely to get a cold, and if you get a cold, you're gonna come out of it quicker. It doesn't really fight the cold virus, but it's just you're healthier, and that's what this does for the bees. They're healthier, so they can withstand any of those things better.
Yep.
Is that once a month you do that? Or is it more?
2 weeks
often?
apart.
2 weeks
Yeah,
apart?
1 and then 2 weeks apart. That's what they're suggesting. A lot of times I'll do a week apart. I mean, they'll have that thing devoured within a couple of minutes.
And you just sprinkle it on?
No. What I do is I take my hive tool and I dip it in the bag and a little pile, and the end of the hive tool is about the measured treatment. And it's on there how much you're supposed to do. And what I will do.
Because I did.
Okay,
Explain how I.
what I do and what I've found works, but you do not want to put it in the brood nest.
Mhm.
Okay? Anywhere in the brood nest. And the reason why is any of this powder that filters down into open larvae, they'll pull that out. They'll pull it out just because it's contaminated. It's not bad, but it's something that is mixed in with the royal gel. So what they suggest, as well as Mellifera Boost, you put it to the side. So I will put it to the side, away from the brood nest, so up to the side somewheres, and I just put it on top, and that's basically drop it down, knock off my hive tool, or if you're getting you got a measurement, tablespoon or whatever it is, and place it there, then that works as well.
Yeah, I do mine differently. I keep a 1 tablespoon measure in the bag, and I pull it out, and I sprinkle most of it along here and along here. But on the sides where I have honey, I'll sprinkle it here too, just not over the bird's nest. And I like it if there's a lot of bees on top here, because it seems like you sprinkle it on them, then they like to clean each other and they eat it up
Yeah.
real quick.
That's the configuration of Mellifera, how we treat with Mellifera Boost. Just across the end bars where the staples are, boom, 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 boom. So that, this time of year, across the board, the whole outfit gets that. Just because it's that beneficial to everything that the gut health of the bees. They worked hard, they've got into all kinds of pesticides, herbicides. I got sprayed more here in the Grand Valley than I ever have in California. Ever. We get hammered here because there's very little, there's not a lot of folks here that understand the application. And some of the farmers are getting better. They're getting better. Some of the guys, in fact, they just got a call from a neighbor in a field out there in 16.5 road. That it wasn't the farmer that I'm on, but it was the neighbor. Hey, we've got problem with milkweed, really bad problem with milkweed, and we're gonna be spraying the whole entire field. We're gonna be killing everything. Because it was that bad, and milkweed, and there were hay farmers, and so said, and the guy that's spraying said this is detrimental to pollinators, so we're just letting you know. Well, some have to move that yard, which is good. I'm glad that they're having that, but I've got hammered, especially in bad weevil years. Anyway, I'm just telling you that there's those events. You might have a neighbor that says, well, that's just a gardener. They got a big garden and they're out there dusting with 7 dust. That'll wipe you out. So anyway.
You're gonna move that yard.
I have to, you have to move it 3 months. So
When can you move it back?
I probably won't this year, but I mean, you can, I would wait 2 weeks.
It depends on the chemical.
Yeah, but
Okay.
2 weeks, and usually the half-life of most of your sprays is less than that, but.
Isn't that really hard?
Mhm.
The cotton field that used to surround my hives when I was in Virginia, I was real good friends with the farmer. He would let me know. And he would let me know what he was spraying. And some of the stuff was only active for like 12 hours and then it became inert. So He would tell me what day he was spraying. I would just screen the front of every one of them so they couldn't get out. He would spray that day. The next morning I would go out and unblock the bees and everything was fine. Okay, so it just depends on whatever chemical they're spraying.
If you're close to a corn field and it's all, usually bees won't work corn unless there's a dearth. And the corn is tasseled and and nothing else is going, then they're gonna work that corn. And neonicotinoids are really, they finally outlawed neonics in Colorado after, I don't know how many other states have no longer allowing neonicotinoid, but that's, and there's a big discussion on if that was affecting bees. Here's the problem, is that one thing by itself is not really the tipping point. It's all these things put together. It is a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and everything in the combination of the viruses, the mite load, the insecticide, herbicides, fungicides, pre-emergence that is used, and or environmental, other natural environmental issues, all that combined, the stresses, that's what everything in that combination, that synergy of bad things that are pressed in, and that's, so it's, what I'm saying is that that's why we're using these supplements, as well as, and this, there's a huge discussion right now, and I don't know if I really want to dive into this because you're beekeepers. If you've heard of a company called Trillion Bees, this is a company that is buying a lot of farmland in Idaho, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado. And they are raising crops that are non-GMO. And with this, they are buying hundreds of thousands of colonies of bees. A lot of commercial beekeepers that I work have already signed up with them. I haven't yet because I'm researching. And they're making some really attractive offers to be part of this conglomeration. And it is basically because there is very little nutrition left in agriculture. Because everything has been genetically modified and a lot of nutrition that the bees used to get are gone. And so that's also something that the bees are fighting. To get their nutrition from natural flowers, it's good. But most of these genetically modified crops have lacked in nutrition. So that's one of the things that are going on right now. We're looking into seeing what's all behind that. There's a lot of big money, billions of dollars, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that are being spent in that whole thing. Anyway, all that to be being said is being a beekeeper, actually have to keep them. Just can't be a bee haver anymore. Gone are the days you buy bugs, throw them in the box, and hopefully, you'd have to look at them 2 or 3 times a year and you get 50, 60 pounds of honey. Those days are gone. But we're doing everything we can do to help you be successful. That's our goal, that's our plan. And so we do all these different, and I appreciate beekeepers helping beekeepers. Thank you. That makes a big difference. And we have mentorship programs and people that are needing help or needing some instruction or some direction. We reach out and we try to get back to you as soon as we can. Anyway, the end of the season of your honey season is coming up, and I hope that you was able to get some honey this year. If you didn't, come next month and you'll get to see those that did and taste everybody's honey. Again, make sure it's your honey. Okay, that'd be good. And we're gonna have a couple of and this, like to do a scientific test, and we'll have a couple controls. We'll throw some in there, like the honey from the Kentucky Fried Chicken, and see if you have it. She's going to the hard in here.
So those 2 supplements that you were talking about, do you use both of them at the same time?
No, not at the same time. never combine treatments and never combine supplements. Yeah, never combine, always treat according to the manufacturer's label. And or treatments, the manufacturer's label, it's very important, how much and when. According to what they say you need to do. Never, yeah, you never combine,
So the two. you
I
were
don't,
talking
and it's
about-
important, I don't combine treatments and supplements either. If I'm treating with something other than oxalic acid, extended. I will put supplements with oxalic acid extended sponges. But not at the same time. I will wait, because that's stressors. Stress will exacerbate, virus load. When bees are stressed, they're more susceptible to all those issues, so, I always keep this. Plus, the oxalic extended is in the, the middle, and all this treatment goes on the top of the second brood box.
Oh, okay.
So all the supplements that we give, this is a supplement, Super DFM is a supplement. A Mellifera Boost is a supplement. Honeybee Healthy is supplement, so there's a number of them out there, there's a lot of them. And so some of them are feeding. Somebody asked me about feeding, you wanna talk about feeding real quick before we're done? Okay, you don't really have to feed right now, you wanna think about feeding. If your bottom boxes, your two brood boxes are heavy, you don't have to worry about feeding, okay? That's the main thing. And we'll talk about configuration of winter, what we do to winterize our bees, how to wrap them if you want to wrap them, wilt boards, inner covers, different things that you can do to help your colonies through the winter. But anyway, any questions? Yeah.
I just had one. I'm wondering, would the club be willing to buy a 2-person hive carrier that we could all check out?
They're fairly expensive, yeah.
In fact, Ralph mentioned it, if you're talking about, you got a 2-handle thing. Okay, there's one that was donated already.
Who's got it? Oh. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, so it's.
I treated with acid strips, but I still have a little bit too. And so can I re-wet these strips, or do I just put sponges?
Strips.
Oh,
Just new strips. To make sure you're 1-to-1 in volume on your mixture. Yeah. And it could be that you've got some drift issues going on.
yeah.
They bumped out there, because all my mite counts are really low right now across the board with those oxalic acid sponges, really low. And across the board,
I just
everything.
waited.
When did you put them in?
It's been.
You-
The clean, so I was afraid to do the right. Watch.
Yeah,
And so I kept not doing it until, or so finally I just decided to put the strips in without doing whitewash, and then I just did.
What's your whitewash?
3 and a 4. That's
yeah,
your-
right.
It's a little high, but you're okay. If you've got the strips on there,
Uh-huh.
you're okay. I mean, you could be better, but don't sweat.
Are your strips still moist or are they dry? Probably the place that that.
Yeah, just make sure your 1-to-1 in volume is, you got a good. And that when you're soaking those sponges, they're actually saturated. They are soaking wet, okay? And so that's, some people, they don't get them really wet enough. Yeah, so that would be the key. Randy Oliver, his scientificbeekeeping.org has instructions on that, so come get your honey, your bottles or your. It's true.